Right guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. The summer break is nearly over, but Red Bull are in an increasingly difficult predicament, especially with rumours that Mercedes targeting Max Verstappen is not over yet. Rumours circulating over the last 24 hours that they are still interested to try and sign Max for 2025 as soon as then. Even though we believe the Antonelli deal is basically done, if Verstappen was to change his mind, who knows what the situation at Mercedes might look like, especially if all this talk over the brake valve inertial drama over the last few days is actually true. What does Max think about what that means for the team's prospects over the next couple of seasons? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Bit of noise in the background today, as there has been for the last couple of days. Remember at the Esports World Cup in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, there's like a Tekken last chance qualifier going on behind me, so the noise is quite loud, and that's kind of why the mic is like not the best, but look, it'll be better in a couple of days time. Hope it's not been too bad over the last couple of days anyway, because the content has been fire, I'm not gonna lie, and it continues today. Porsche, Formula 2 champion. He's not very happy, and understandably, that he's not going to get a Formula 1 seat. I thought that it was possible. Even this year, it seems plausible with Audi needing a driver at Audi Sauber. They could get a driver that was part of their program before. But it doesn't sound like they're going to do it. And even it's Gabriel Bortoleto now that it's in that kind of conversation to potentially join that team for next season. Even Bortoleto says, F2 driver right now, I think Perez will be out next year. So he's making the claim quite clear. And of course, we'll discuss over the coming minutes exactly what's happened with Red Bull over the last couple of months, which has led to this point where Perez looks far worse than he did, shall we say, at the start of the season. A couple of quick things on Haas. Thought it was interesting from Io Komatsu here, talking about how he effectively believes the last couple of years the team was making excuses. It's incredible, really, because when we talked about Steiner getting fired and effectively Gene Haas deciding that he was going to keep the investment limited, but believing that they could do better with the resources, the general community feeling was that Steiner was probably in the right and Gene Haas was effectively wishful thinking that they could achieve more with no more investment. But actually, I think Komatsu's kind of shown they probably can. And he's saying, yeah, well, we were making excuses before as a team, and now that's a different story. And saying that they used to be in denial about their upgrades and made various excuses that, you know, they weren't able to make it work, whatever. And the reality is now that Haas are in the most promising position they've been in for a very long time. Quickly on Alpine, they don't really care so much about the partner for Gasly. That's, of course, adding to the rumour that maybe Jack Doohan is going to be the man to partner Pierre Gasly at that team. Of course, no longer Esteban Ocon. He's going to Haas for next season. All their energy, apparently, according to Briatore, is going into their technical side. Whether that's going to do much, who knows. Carlos Sainz could have maybe joined Williams, or could have joined Alpine, sorry, but he didn't. He went to Williams instead, alongside Alex Albon. I thought their perception on this Williams was quite interesting, because effectively what they say is, because Sainz is going to be more competitive, that means that with Albon as well there, it makes their strategy team have a harder time, because they no longer have one driver way ahead of the other one, which is kind of brutal on Sargent in some way, that they're saying, yeah, he was so bad with respect to Albon that it was easy for our strategy team to decide who to basically give precedence to in terms of strategy, because there was always one guy leading the way. Of course, with Sainz, you wouldn't expect that to be the case. And that is a fascinating driver pairing to me, how Albon and Sainz match up next season, who's the best of the two of them. I really don't know the answer to that question. I think that Albon's a better driver than he was when he was put, I would say, too early alongside Max a few years ago at Red Bull. Is he going to be a match for Sainz? I think it's possible they could be pretty neck and neck next season. That's probably what I expect. But, you know, maybe Sainz handles business. Maybe Albon's better than we think. Maybe, to be fair, Logan Sargent has done a decent job over the last few rounds. The numbers don't look great, but actually in terms of pure pace, it hasn't been as bad for Sargent this year, but it's still just not been anywhere near good enough to justify him keeping his spot at the team. But let's talk about the whole Red Bull Mercedes situation as we've kept seeing unfold over the last few days. Newey departed the team. Okay, he's still kind of part of Red Bull for now. In September, we believe we are going to get his announcement of going to Aston Martin as his next team. Quickly on the RB17, the car that he designed as effectively his final hurrah from Red Bull, and this is kind of remarkable. He says that the Silverstone pole time this year was pretty rapid. It's, you know, the F1 cars are fast, if you guys weren't aware. They're pretty fast. The RB17 is faster, and the incredible thing is that I believe it has 2 seats, doesn't it? You can actually take a passenger in this car, and it's a marvellous piece of machinery, clearly. Actually, they had one of our customers tested on the simulator, not a professional driver, but a very good amateur driver, and he in the simulator would have been on pole at Silverstone by a second in the car. So this RB17 is faster than a Formula 1 car, and on some level it's incredible that it's kind of possible to build a car that actually is real, that is faster than a Formula 1 car, that almost looks like it could be road legal. I think they can kind of convert it to actually be road legal in some ways, and, you know, people can own it, they can drive this car around, and it's going to be faster than a Formula 1 car. Of course, given when you take all the limits off, when you have no regulations, you design what you want, sure, it's capable to create some unbelievable stuff, which is clearly what they've done. And imagine in the hands of an actual professional, you know, we could be talking a good couple of seconds a lap faster than a Formula 1 car. The problem is that, as mentioned in the article here, that the tyres have to be able to cope with it, because you can't just have normal tyres on a car that generates this amount of downforce. So the RB17 actually produces too much downforce that the tyres can cope with. So they're going to have to get some very special tyres made to even make the car work. The big question, though, of the last couple of days has been this talking point that we discussed yesterday again with Peter Winter and Craig Scarborough, talking about the potential asymmetric braking in the RB20 over the last couple of months, which now seemingly has no longer been there since Miami. I will quickly mention, because it was a talking point of yesterday, how this was discovered, because it is a feeling that if Red Bull were doing this season, were they doing it last season? I don't know the answer to that, but it seems plausible, does it not? Because how do you find a device like this in the car? Well, it's something of a challenge, clearly, because nobody found it until now. The question is, how do they find it out? There was some theories on that. I think it was just before Miami, in and around that ballpark, the Chinese Grand Prix, around about there. They did a tyre test, all of the teams. So there's been some speculation, because Craig Scarborough made it clear in the replies actually himself that the tyre preservation would be a massive advantage of this. I'm not going to dive into again all the details on what this potential device does and the advantage it gives. We talked about it in detail yesterday, but Scarb says he thinks that if this device was real, which it seems like it's at least plausible that it may have been, and he draws diagrams to that effect, it would have major advantages in terms of tyre preservation, which has been a key characteristic strength of the Red Bull over the last couple of years. So, does that potentially mean that the tyre test might have happened, and Pirelli, could they have been like, hey, I mean, these tyres are worn inconceivably less than the other teams? I don't know, this is obviously massive speculation, and I don't honestly think this is true, but I think it's interesting to think about that there was a test around about that time, and, you know, who discovered this, right? That's really what I want to know. If this is true, like, did Newey snitch? Did someone at Red Bull snitch? Was it merely other teams believing that there might have been something dodgy going on and therefore putting out an inquest, really, and therefore this is maybe discovered, at which point then, of course, the Formula 1 regulators, the FIA, actually changed the rules to ensure that any potential misreading and grey areas and loopholes and clarification was absolutely set in stone. I just wonder where it all came from to actually discover that this was true. Was it Jos Verstappen after the potential downfall of the team? That's another question that I have, right? What happened at the start of this season, at the start of 2024? Jos Verstappen was clearly at odds with Christian Horner, saying that the team was going to fall apart, the downfall was coming and all this. Could Jos Verstappen, if they were aware of this situation, have kind of leaked it out to the relevant parties to have the Red Bull downfall that's currently happening? But of course, if Jos Verstappen was to have done that, then his own driver, as in Max, would have been costed wins, as he has been as a result. So it's really a mess, but I just want to know where this came from. Was it just speculation that caused this? Did Pirelli say, hey, Red Bull's tyres at the rears are really not degrading at all compared to other teams, what's going on here? Or was it something else entirely? All we know for sure is that Red Bull's performance advantage that they had last year, even the year before, and certainly the start of this season, has vanished, right? And for the last few rounds, it's been very, very competitive in terms of race pace. Ferrari have been not really there, but sometimes, such as in Spa, and then it's been McLaren mainly, and then Mercedes at most tracks really putting up the fight. So Red Bull need to get back to where they are, and of course Pierre Wache talked about how, well, if you're not satisfied with something, you've got to fix it. But how does Max Verstappen see this situation, especially if this is actually true, that for the last couple of years, the Red Bull hasn't actually been this incredible superior machine. It's just because they've been using a loophole device to allow them to asymmetrically brake in the rear, which gives them a major advantage. So if that's true, Max might think, and for good reason, that maybe somewhere else is the place to be, because for the last 6 months, when we talked about the Horner drama, the Jos Verstappen drama, the Helmut Marko drama, the power struggle at Red Bull, whatever you want to say, Max might leave. The argument was, well, Red Bull have the fastest car by miles, Mercedes are miles behind, why would Max leave? Now, Mercedes have pretty much there or thereabouts the fastest car. They've won 3 of the last 4 races over the last 4 weekends. Verstappen has won none of those, of course, and the other victory was Piastri, controversially, at the Hungarian Grand Prix. So you've got that to consider, and it's not like the Red Bull are the fastest car anymore. So all of a sudden, that kind of talking point has changed around dramatically, and you know, you've always got to wonder if this is true, how many people knew about this. It's tough to imagine that Verstappen wasn't aware of this being done if this was being done. But, you know, Callum Nicholas, for example, mechanic for Red Bull, he said yesterday that no, this is BS, it's not happening, and he says that he knows because he puts the car together. So, you know, look, we discussed this yesterday, so difficult to say whether Max or the drivers would have known about this, but what Max does know about is that the car does not handle as well as it did, right? I mean, he's talked about it, Max, at length over the last couple of rounds, that, yeah, the car doesn't handle as well. I'm getting understeer into these corners. I'm not having as good of a time as I was at the start of the season. Now, the Mercedes is not a perfect handling car, but Hamilton and Russell are seemingly way happier with it than they were at the start of last season, at the start of this season as well. And Hamilton even himself says he's expecting a banger second half of the year, not just because Mercedes are expecting to make further progress, but also just because McLaren, Red Bull, Max, basically, right? But Red Bull, and then, you know, McLaren and Ferrari, Mercedes, all in the mix potentially for race victories. So this is when the question is raised, given this discovery has seemingly now been made, on what it means for Max, because look, people are going to have their perspective, if this is true, on what this deems, like whether Max's championships over the last couple of years have an asterisk in play or whatever. I'm sure that's a topic we'll talk about over the coming days if there's more to this story than we even currently have. But regardless of that side of it, does it affect Verstappen's feeling on whether he stays with the team or not? Whether he considers an alternative? Because if it's now been revealed effectively that, yeah, Red Bull, because they were using this, are not able at all to easily get back to where they were before, and you've still got the internal drama with the Horner situation and everything that's happened behind the scenes. Newey has left, Wheatley has left. Surely there are even more push factors after this development for Verstappen than there were before. But the rumour is that Andrea Kimi Antonelli is effectively locked into Mercedes. There was a rumour on the 1st of August that, yeah, this is a done deal. It's, you know, job done, it's signed. He's going to be announced at Monza alongside George Russell. But if Max decides to say, hey, Toto, you know what, we are going to do it, I'm coming to Mercedes, Helmut Marko's coming as well, then, you know, what do you do, right? Because surely at that point you'll say, all right, Kimi, sorry, I know we signed the deal, but, you know, you're actually going to be a reserve for whatever, or, you know, I'm not sure what would happen in that case. But the rumour has it that it ain't over yet, because the discussion was over the last 24 hours that Mercedes are not yet giving up on this deal. So, you know, who knows? They might have decided, Mercedes, all right, whatever, let's just try in 2026, try and make that work. My feeling is that if Max, probably Mercedes aren't pursuing it so much anymore. My feeling is that Mercedes are probably going to say, all right, whatever, Max, if you want to come, you can come, but we are going to get Antonelli and we're going to get Russell as our pairing for next season. I think it's more so on Max. If Max and his team and, you know, Helmut Marko or whatever decide after, especially what's happened and potentially emerged over the last few days, that actually Mercedes is the way to go, that he stands a better chance there, not even just for 25, but certainly for 2026 and beyond because of their engine strength and everything to that effect, then, you know, maybe that's what will happen. So I think for me, it's more so on whether Max decides to reach out to Mercedes to try and get something to happen. And if he does, I think they would be open to it. Toto Wolff's been very clear on that. I somewhat doubt that Mercedes are really pursuing this so much anymore, just because I think they're pretty satisfied with getting Antonelli if they can, which they will. But, you know, Max is still on the agenda, but maybe not for next season. That's kind of my prediction here, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. And of course, Aston Martin are also interested in Max Verstappen as well from 2026 and beyond. So, look, there's some speculation how much faster Max is than any other driver on the grid. Is he faster than any other driver on the grid? Is it just Sergio Perez is that much worse? It's tough to say, but Max Verstappen has looked effectively imperious for the last couple of seasons. All of a sudden, this potential potential brake valve is removed, and all of a sudden he doesn't look like a normal driver. Obviously, he's still Max Verstappen, and he still scored the most points despite that over the last few rounds. But it's quite clear that Max isn't winning races with an AlphaTauri or a Haas, as Helmut Marko claims a season or so ago. One of the other big questions, of course, as well is whether the season can actually turn around. The gap that Verstappen has in the championship is probably too much to overturn, and there are 10 rounds remaining in the season. A few of these rounds should be good for their opponents, right? I mean, Mercedes will be pretty happy, I would say, with, Zandvoort, for example. I guess what's kind of more interesting maybe is McLaren, because they are the contender to win both championships that are closest to Red Bull. So I think Zandvoort they'll be happy about. Monza should still be good for Red Bull, as potentially should Baku. Singapore has never really suited their car, and Max has historically had a torrid time around there, so that shouldn't be great. And that race really is the chance, I would say, for Lando to close the gap. Like, Lando needs to close the gap by, I would say 7 or 8 points per round in the next few rounds, and then he needs to have a really big weekend in Singapore, and Max to have a stinker, I would say, for there to be any realistic chance this championship continues all that much longer. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Just wanted to have a couple of quick words on this, because race fans concluded their driver ranking the other day. Max Verstappen, of course, eventually ended up as number 1, but and Max has been number 1 so far this season. There's no doubt about that in my mind. The question was whether Lando should be number 2, because I thought this was, I don't know where to put Lando, but I thought that number 2 was absolutely, kind of ridiculous, to be honest. I think for me, Norris has had multiple situations where he's not taken advantage of opportunities off the line, bottled it on the first lap, made numerous unforced errors in a championship battle. There's no way in my mind that Norris has been the second best driver on average so far this season. Over the start of the first few rounds, sure, but the car wasn't as good then. Over the last few rounds, when the opportunity was there to close the gap, he's made, a few errors, and Piastri's outperformed him over the last few rounds. So, I don't know where to put Lando. Russell, you could have put higher. Hulkenberg, you could have put higher. I mean, Hulkenberg might be the second best driver this year on some metrics as well, given his performances. But very much intrigued to your thoughts, as always, in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.